It's the Awake Space Astrology Podcast. I'm Laurie Rivers, your host, here to help you with some inspiration to get your aspirations out into the world. All right, grab your coffee, your tea, your water, whatever you're drinking, your iced coffee, East Coast. It's hot, hot, hot for you right now. And if you're in the Gulf Coast, I hope you have some safety precautions in mind. I know it's going to be very, very wet this week for you. And I'm not going to lie, I've been talking about this stuff for over a year, and the weather is just going to continue to display that climate change is here. And I told you, by the winter of 2024-2025, anybody who's in denial is just delulu. Okay. Speaking of 2025, I am most of the way done with my presentation that I'm doing this coming Saturday on the 2025 year ahead, where I give you a month-by-month breakdown of what I think is going to happen in the year ahead. Now, for everybody who signs up for this event on Saturday, you get the recording, you get to stream that, and then you'll get access to the recording for December's event and a ticket too, if you jump on it fast enough. So I do a refresh at the end of the year while we have a little more context, especially for that beginning part of the year. But good luck catching your breath in 2025. It's just a boom, 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 boom. It's a lot, and it is mostly climate, although I do think that there's going to be more conflict out there as well. But it's going to be impeded by climate. It is. So global conflict is going to get interrupted by the weather. Okay. And people say, oh, that's great. I'm like, no, I really think about that for a second. There's some magic, though. It's not all bad news. It's not all bad news. There's some real magic. And that's kind of what I want to talk to you about today. I want to talk about how to make the most of the energy even when it's intense, because we've been so trained to focus on the, oh no, what'll I do energy, instead of how do I make the most of the moment? How do I make the most of this moment? How can I be the most present with myself and find that peace within? And I thought I'd talk a little bit about that, because I think we're all going to need it as we head towards the solstice, because right after the solstice, we've got a full moon. We've got a full moon. Oh, part 2 of this podcast, the patron-only part, I'll go through your rising sign full moon rituals so that you get some help with that. I'm trying not to bang into my table too much. It makes noise. I'm working on getting my mic set up better. I moved my studio around, and working on getting the mics set up correctly. So not quite where I want it yet. We'll celebrate when I do. Gosh, we've got a lot of new patrons in again every week. We're just growing. Thank you for your support. If you're new to listening to the show, this show is ad-free thanks to the patrons of the Awake Space. You can check out the Patreon through the link in the show notes. And I give shout outs. In fact, I've had to split it up into 2 parts because there's so many new people in. If you got your welcome letter and it didn't have the welcome video, I made a new one last month. You can let me know in the Awake Space chat and our chat community, and I'll get that linked up. I'll repost it again so everybody has access to that. That just kind of shows you your way around, so you know where to find stuff. You can also find it under the patron resources in collections up on Patreon. If you look for collections, it's there. But yeah, so we're going to talk about, we got a big full moon this week. We got the solstice this week, and we're going to be talking about how to make the most of the energy, even when it looks like things are nuts, because this full moon kicks off a month of a karma sandwich, because we have the June full moon at 0 degrees Capricorn, And we have the July full moon at like 29, something like that. I'd have to go look. But it's a karma sandwich, 2 Capricorn full moons. Lucky us. And karma isn't necessarily bad, so we'll talk about that in the making the most of it. It's consequences, folks. It's consequences. So whether we're driving to work or we're folding laundry or taking the kids to the park or resting, because, man, resting is something we don't do enough of, is it? Whatever we're doing together, taking our hot girl walk, well, just take a deep breath and we'll go through this together. So in this next segment, let's talk about the solstice and what I see for that. And I'll talk a little bit about what the solstice is and what that energy means. And then we'll talk about that full moon. Again, the blow by blow, like what you can expect per your rising sign. I do that in the patron only podcast. Alrighty. Why don't we get to it? Let's go celebrate the solstice together. All right, it's the solstice this week. That's the summer solstice in the northern hemisphere. In the southern hemisphere, and I know we have a lot of listeners in the southern hemisphere, it's your winter solstice. For those of us north of the equator, we are looking at the longest day of the year. The longest day of the year. And in the winter solstice, in the southern hemisphere, it's the longest night. It's the longest night. So I'm going to talk about the summer solstice. Sorry, those of you down under. But the summer solstice is a time where we recognize the energizing power of the sun. The solstice is actually when the sun enters into Cancer. Oh, yeah. Which I've always said means that is not a weak sign. You know, all those people who are like, water signs are weak. You know, go listen to Bruce Lee a little bit, who said, be like water. None of the signs are weak. They all have their particular strengths. As I was telling the students in my intermediate astrology class today, like, remember, we've got to deconstruct from these over stylized and idealized ideas of what is strong, what is weak, what is good, what is bad, what is, girl parts and boy parts, over genderfying energy. Like all those people who are like the divine feminine, the divine masculine. It is divine to be human, indeed. Okay. It is divine to be a tree. It is divine to be a rock. It is divine to exist and to be in a co-creative space in the universe. But this very human idea of what energy is in its physicality should be up for debate, because after all, who said so? You read some of the older astrological literature and people talk about the nature of man. Right there, that's a little bit of a problematic statement, but, they mean human beings. And that our human nature is thus and so, and very defined and determined, and yet said with their whole chests in the 18th century, the 19th century, the 20th century, before neuroscience had really got its legs under it. Deconstructing our ideas about what energy is and how it expresses through the physical is very important. And when we talk about astrology, even more so, because through that we have a healing path to deconstruct and reconstruct. And I bring this up because this solstice is a heavy hitter. We have that full moon coming up the very next day. at 1 degree of Capricorn. It's a karma sandwich on the way. This energy that we have coming for the solstice, it isn't a time to stand in the sun and see every one of our pores. It's like, think about standing in front of a magnifying glass and looking at all the blemishes on your face, all of the facial hair you missed when you waxed or didn't pluck, or the blackheads or whatever, the rough patch of skin that you just can't stand and can't quite get enough moisturizer on. That's not how we want to use this light. We don't want to shine the light on our flaws. We need to shine it into that which needs energizing. What part of our animating force needs nurturing? It's Cancer, okay? It's about the tending and the nurturing of a person or a process or an enterprise. Because Cancer is a financial sign, my friends. I'll die on that hill. You have this opportunity this week to really shine a light on a part of you that needs energizing, invigorating. Okay. You need to boost the signal a little bit. I want to talk about resiliency because we're all going to need it coming up as we move towards 2025. In fact, as we get into October, guys, I tell you, as we get into July, here we go. Here we effing go, to quote the TikTok sound. Resiliency is made up of 7 factors. There are 3 concepts and 4 skills. The first concept is, I am capable. Okay. I am capable. Understanding your capabilities, such as, I may not know how to do it, but I know how to learn. I may not learn as fast as everyone else, but I know I'll eventually get there. Those are all great statements to make. Instead of, well, I'm super slow. I'm not as good as everybody else. I can't do that. I don't have this. I don't have that. That's just, you're taking your feet right out from underneath you. That's not realistic. It's pessimism versus, well, it takes me a minute to get it. It takes me a minute to process, but once I've got it, I've got it. So knowing you're capable is the first of the concepts. Okay. The second concept is, I have influence. I have influence. I have influence over my own life. You're not at the mercy of circumstances. You're not at the mercy of other people. You have influence over something in your life. And that something is you. You have the influence on you. We'll talk about that in a little bit more, because the solstice is a bit about your influence on yourself, your energizing self, inspiring yourself. The third thought, the third concept. Okay, so the first 2 being, I am capable, I have influence, and I am significant. I matter. I matter. Okay. And that is lacking for so many people that, I don't really matter. Nobody really cares about me, because we've put our self-esteem in the hands of other people. We keep seeking validation outside of self. It's not narcissistic to be confident and know what you know what you're good at, know what your experience level is. Okay. Know your capabilities. Know that you have influence over your own life. We'll talk more about that in a minute. And to understand that you matter. You're significant. But if you're putting your significance in the hands of other people, you're likely to be disappointed. But you do matter. You had a 1 in 400 trillion chance of being human. You're not here on accident. No matter what anybody else said, you're here now. For what purpose? To be here now. Okay, to quote Ram Dass. If you don't know who Ram Dass is, look him up. Spiritual teacher. The skills you need, okay, in resiliency are interpersonal skills, the ability to communicate with other people. And that skill has been kind of sliding in our society, even with our advanced technology, because we haven't fostered good communication skills, active listening, the ability to have discourse. There's a fear of offending, and there's a fear of debate, because people take disagreement as an insult. I'm not talking about knockdown, drag out fights or name calling. That's a different story, but you can have different ideas. I always say you don't have to agree with me. We can discuss it. Doesn't mean I'll change my mind. Agreement is not necessary to have good relationship. You can agree on a certain amount of things, but you can have different theologies, different philosophies. I always say, if you need me to believe the same as you, your faith or your belief isn't very strong. How many times do I say I do not evangelize astrology? I don't try to convince anybody it's real. That's not my job. My job is to talk to people who want to know about it. If they want to know about it, I'll be glad to talk about it, but I will not defend or argue the benefits of astrology to somebody who really doesn't care and is just wanting a fight. Because that's not communicating. That's not an actual debate. But I can be friends with people who aren't into it. But I won't get into conversation about it. I'll be like, hey, you already said you don't like it. So I'm not going to get into it. If you're bored, we can talk about politics. How's that? Let's go toe to toe there. Yeah. So interpersonal skills. All right. The ability to communicate with other people. And then intrapersonal skills, being able to communicate with yourself. I know. Intrapersonal skills. Noticing your own inner dialogue. And so often we don't, or we think we don't have any power over it because, again, we don't realize the influence we have over ourselves and our ability to learn new things. Right. So intrapersonal skills, being able to assess ourselves, communicate with ourselves. The third skill is systemic skills, understanding how a system works. And systems come in all shapes and sizes, okay? Whether it's a school system or a government system, and there's lots of government systems, like how do you sign up for electricity? How do you, register to vote? All of those are systems, okay? Family systems, social systems, your system at work, your computer system, those are all systems. And you're at a deficit when you don't understand those. And some of that's trained through society and culture. Have you ever gone in to do something for the first time at like a government office? Like you've never had to do it. And the person's, maybe you've gone to the DMV and you've never had to do something before. It's your first time. Maybe you remember getting your driver's license. And the person at the DMV expects you to know what form you're supposed to have or how you to fill it out, or you've moved states. I remember when I moved to California, it was done very differently than Washington State. And the woman at the counter looked at me like I had like Medusa hair that I didn't know. I'm like, I'm moving states. It's not done the same way in this other place. I was at a deficit. I didn't have the systemic skills for the state, even though I'd read up on it. But I was like, I don't know, this is confusing. It's totally different than where I'm from. Right? So systemic skills. And then judgmental skills, the ability to make decisions The ability to make decisions. Sometimes we have to make a split-minute decision. Like in the moment, you have to make a decision. Go right, go left. How am I going to decide to get a job? Which type of job do I need to get? A lot of times people will just jump. Maybe I'm unhappy at work. I'm just going to quit my job instead of looking for another job. Remember, I told you right now is not the time to rage quit. Rage apply. You'll thank me later. So being able to make good decisions and have discernment using critical thinking. And that's also taught. Skills are taught. Okay, skills are taught. Those 4 skills. Interpersonal, intrapersonal, systemic, and judgmental. Okay. Now, the 3 concepts. The one I want to talk about, influence. Okay, influence. Understanding you need to be the greatest influence in your own life. People want to blame influencers on social media. But you're the biggest influence in your life. It's your life. It's your life. And we can be lacking in any of those, all of us, all human beings. Okay. But if we're really lacking in those, it makes it hard to navigate challenging time, because resiliency is the ability to bounce back under challenging circumstances. There isn't a human being alive that has not had challenging circumstances. Period. End of story. There isn't a human being alive who has not had adverse circumstances. And you got to think about you. So we do have challenging circumstances, not only right now, but into the future. Okay. So how we meet those is everything. And I've said it before, and I'm going to say it again. 2020 wasn't even close to the worst year on my top 20 list. Top 20 worst years out of 55 next month. Not even close. Not even close. It was a little scary, because we didn't know what was up with COVID. And the more we learn about COVID, the more worried I get. But honestly, it was not the worst things that ever happened to me. At all. Oh no, I had to stay home. Having to go to school was a lot more stressful. As an introvert, just saying. Having to be around people. Having to go into an office. That was way worse. Sitting under artificial light. Blah! Although the water cooler gossip and the cake on people's birthdays or the Friday donuts, I don't know, those were fun. Going to lunch with everybody was good. It's kind of like at school. What's your favorite part? Lunch and recess. Oh. You're like, Laurie, what are you on tonight? There's a lot of stuff coming up. And one of the ways we navigate these things, and what I want you to use this solstice energy for, because it happens the day before the full moon, is I really want you to be intentional on that day. And it happens in the afternoon, by the way. The solstice does not happen the minute you wake up in the morning. It's when the sun reaches 0 degrees, Cancer, 0 minutes. Okay. That's when the solstice is. And I want you to think about a part of yourself that needs nurturing, sustenance. Tend it. What part of your personal garden needs some fertilizer? How do you need to feed your soul? And you can't look to other people to do it. It would be so nice if this idealized and parentified idea of partner or deity or child could shine their light upon us and gift us all we need. It's really not feasible because every other person is having to manage their own selves and their own reality through their own perceptions. We so often put our power in the hands of other people. So often we do that. When in reality, what we need to do is understand our own influence on our life. Now, what do I mean by that? You cannot control, the weather. We've got big storms about to hit the Gulf of Mexico. It's going to flood in Louisiana and Texas into Mexico, all the way down to Belize. Okay. Well, you can prepare as much as you can prepare. You can't change the weather, but you can change how you're dealing with it. Okay. Story time. How Laurie became clinically depressed. Years ago. Many years ago. I think it was like 2006, almost 20 years ago now. We had a horrific winter storm. And I mean horrific. It took power out for 200,000 people. We were iced in. Not just snowed in, but iced in, no power, which meant we had no water because we were on a well and the pumps ran on electricity. It had really kind of hit us out of nowhere. It was a lot worse than they said it was going to be. And normally when we got hit by winter storms, my then spouse would be out working in it. But this time he was home. And he could be very negative and complain. And I was feeling very, very raw. I was at a point in my healing process where I was really sensitive. And I had been asking for support in this. Okay. Now, where was my influence? Was I putting it in me? No. But I was trying to keep things upbeat. Not toxically positive, but upbeat, because I was emotionally fragile and I needed things to be pretty even keel because we had 2 kids and a Labrador stuck in the room where the fireplace was in her living room with big wool blankets over the living room entryway and up against the windows because we had blinds, but we wanted to trap any of that cold, keep the cold air out, keep the one spot in the house that could stay warm. I was trying to, make treats on the barbecue, and I tried to keep it upbeat, kept a pot of water on the fireplace insert so that we could make hot cocoa and, bake potatoes in the fire, read by lantern light, and all that fun stuff. And he was complaining and picking at the children, which was irritating the children. And if you've ever seen the study by Stanford University, emotions can be contagious. And I was resisting the negativity. And I think last week I talked about resistance, right? The more you push against something, the more it grows, right? So it's starting to get very, very negative. I am very fragile in that moment. My psyche is very fragile, and I'm like trying to be upbeat. And the more upbeat I am, the more the negativity starts spewing. And I went up to him and I said, I need things to be positive right now. We need to make the best of this right now. I am feeling very fragile. Please. Now, what did I just do? I put my mental health in his hands, right? We do it a lot. Was it smart? No, it was not. And he looked at me straight in the eye and he complained. And something in me cracked in that moment. And I went onto the couch and I pulled up the blanket over my head. And I did not get off the couch except to go to the bathroom for quite a long time. Quite a long time. And it took months to recover. Now you could say, well, that dirty, rotten SOB, how inconsiderate of him. Except I'm the one who put my mental health into his hands instead of being like, well, I can't stop anyone else from doing what they're doing, but I can focus inside and give me what I need. But see, if I'd had those skills, I wouldn't have been at that part of my healing journey, would I? So I'm not beating myself up here. Don't ever beat yourself up. And it serves as a good teaching story. So when I say don't give your power away, that's what I'm talking about. Would it have been nice that had he been considerate and recognized the fragility? Right? Right? It might have been. I also wanted it to stay more upbeat for the kids because it wasn't good for the kids to have the constant complaining. Would it have been nice if he would have been considerate about that? Oh, sure. But like I said, former spouse. So let's say I was still in that space and the summer solstice was right around the corner. What would I do? What would I do? What will you do with the summer solstice right around the corner? Understand that you don't want to hand your power away to somebody else and put your mental health conditions on their behavior. Doesn't mean it won't be difficult to deal with or listen to. It may be very, very irritating, but you still have the influence over yourself. You could go to the bathroom, lock the door, wash your face, have a good cry. It's amazing what a good cry can do for us. And sit there and go, all right, how do I want to feel in this moment? I'm feeling frustrated. It's that how, you want to identify your feeling. How am I feeling right now? I feel frustrated. I feel like I can't do anything. I feel like I don't have any power right now. I'm tired of being out of power. I'm out of power in my house and I'm out of power in me. This sucks. Right? Okay. Well, how do I want to feel? Well, I want to feel my power. What does the power inside me feel like? How do I feel lit up? How do I feel? And power isn't about feeling full of rage or domination energy. Just what does it feel like to have the light turned on? What's it like to have that pilot light flaming? Remember, the sun is your animating force. What's it like to feel animated in yourself, at ease? To be in your power is a quiet strength. It is just knowing who you are, right? I know me. You know you. Okay, you don't know you. Not my job. My job is to know me. With this summer solstice coming up, and okay, Southern Hemisphere, I'll give you a little bone. With the winter solstice, it's all foundational. So what scaffolding do I need to put into play? How can I give myself the structures that I need? What is the beginning foundations for this new sense of self I want to step into? How can I gird myself and get myself ready to be the best version of myself I can be in any present moment? Notice what I said there, the best version of myself in any present moment, because it's fluctuating. It is not a steady Eddie thing. When we're tired, cranky, hungry, thirsty, we're going to act differently, or if we're in pain, we're going to behave differently than when we're fully satisfied, fully rested, having taken care, right? So what kind of foundation do I need and what kind of scaffolding do I want to build over the next, okay? Because you have the influence over yourself to be able to do so. All right. So that's what the solstice has to bring. And we're going to do, for all patrons, okay, I'm doing the summer solstice party on Thursday, June 20th. I just put a post out on the Patreon, and we're going to do a vision exercise. Not so much a board. I like to do art cards. I think they're a lot more, they're pretty and they're easier to put somewhere. Okay. So we do art cards. I lead a guided meditation. And we just have some fun checking in. You don't have to do the activity. You can just hang out. Enjoy the meditation, soak up the vibes. Okay. We're doing that at 7:30 p.m. Pacific. I know it's late East Coast, but I read till 6 p.m. And I need a chance to recoup after readings before I do it. So, but I'll have the replay up as soon as it's done. We'll have that link up so you can follow along. Okay. We're doing it after the sun reaches the solstice. But that'll be fun. Okay. That's always a fun activity. I do these at the summer solstice and the winter solstice. So we'll do it again in December. But everybody who's a patron gets to watch the replay or join us. That'll be fun. Get you ready. And we're really going to focus on the energy we need to move through the next 6 months until the next solstice. Shining our light on ourselves. We so often kind of use our light like a beacon, trying to get any kind of reflection off of anybody else that looks like it's kind of a match, when if we're just shining and being ourselves, that gravity can't help but draw people in. Just like the sun, right? The sun doesn't shine to be seen, my friends. The sun shines because that is what the sun does. That's a Laurie Rivers quote. Sun doesn't shine to be seen. It shines because that's what it does. You have influence over yourself. You are capable. And you have significance. And if you're going to argue for your limitations, you're not doing anybody any favors except yourself. Or not even yourself. Okay? People have been getting attention in the wrong ways by leaning into luxuriating in what they consider their flaws, their fallibility, their weaknesses, somebody done them wrong song, instead of leaning into your strength. You have already survived the worst of your days. How do you not have power? With that, I'm going to leave you and go to some patron shout-outs. Then we're going to talk about that full moon. Dun, dun, dun. You heard the music. You know what time it is. It is patron shout-outs. Thanks to patrons, the Awake Space Astrology Podcast is ad-free. All right, here's our newest patrons. And I'm doing this in 2 parts. So this is part 1 of patron shoutouts. We've got Janet, Lindsay, Tina, Jasmine, Elle, Kimberly, Ree, Roman, Becky, Kathleen, Celia, Yama, Christina, Cindy, Nicole, Rebecca, Heather, Gina, Latanya, Kel, Dina, Blair, Eleanor, S. Quintana, Kelly, Brittany, Sheila, Jonathan, Christina, Angela, Michelle, Bethany, Talitha, Thomas, Tracy, Completion, Aaron, Nicole, Taryn, Sandra, Christine, Tisha, Carrie Starr, Kat, Ann, Janessa, and Van. And we're going to leave it right there. And we're going to go right here. We're going to stop there. All right, newest patrons, thank you so much. I hope to see you at the summer solstice party where I do the a guided meditation where I walk you through the energy of the solstice and help you choose your pathways when it comes to making your vision for the rest of 2024. And how we can shine our light on ourselves. All right. You ready for that full moon info? I think you should be. I think you're going to be really ready for that full moon because it's not so much that the full moon this time is all on its own. It's just, it's setting up that karma sandwich. And, I got you. Let's find out what you need to know. All right, we're going to talk about that full moon in Capricorn happening right after the solstice. Right after, not long after, indeed. And I wrote about it in the Awake Space Astrology magazine, which all patrons get at the $15 level and up, but you can find it in the Patreon shop and some back issues as well. Excited about that. That's coming along nicely. Of course, my Mars and Sag always bites off more than it can chew and chews off more than it can bite. Whatever, strike that, reverse it, right? And so, of course, I'm getting ready for that 2025 year ahead. And 2024 is the setup year. It's the setup, my friends. It is the setup. And so, it's a little wild. And time moved quickly, and then things have started to slow down just a little bit. Kind of. We still have a lot of Gemini energy, although Venus is now in Cancer. So that's a little more nurturing. That's why I'm leaning into let's nurture ourselves. So now, if you're a patron, I read the articles to you and talked about. I read all of the articles, not the horoscopes, but the articles from the magazine in a patron-only podcast, and we call that story time. But I thought I'd touch on what I wrote about this full moon, because it does create the karma sandwich, and what I'm calling the karma sandwich. And karma isn't always bad. It's just consequences. It's logical consequences. And so with this full moon, it's really important to be open to new ways of finding your ground. Okay. New ways of finding your ground, because you're going to need new systems to meet the changing cosmic tides. Okay. Because we have October coming up. And that's going to be wild. Okay. Big weather, big political upset. We could see some governments around the world fail, we could see leaders ousted. We could see, and this is again, global. And I'll keep you guys informed, but it's going to be chaotic. And in order to meet that kind of chaos, we have to have our own internal compass very well calibrated, and we need to have our own, true north set. And these full moons are a good setup for that. It's a good setup for that. So here's what I wrote in the magazine. Every once in a while, we get 2 full moons in the same zodiac sign, and it's usually a sign of something significant. This time we have 2 full moons in Capricorn. The first is at 1 degree on the 21st or 22nd of June, depending on where you live in the world. And the second is at 29 degrees of Capricorn in the early hours of July 21st. I don't want to hear one word of complaint, because it's my birthday too. And I plan on having a damn good day, and you can too. So every time I hear, oh no, that's my birthday. Guys, if you're over 12 years old, first of all, are you kidding me? Second of all, it's up to us. Remember, you have influence. You can have a reasonably good day. Turn off the news if you need to. But to me, if I can have a good cup of coffee and sit outside and listen to an audiobook or hang out with people I care about and have a reasonably good day, that's a win. That's a win. Okay. So what does all of this mean? Heavy sigh and a long pause. It's a turning point. Capricorn is the sign that governs foundations, direction, and authority. Not all authority is expressed as dominance and control. Authority can be expertise. It can be someone who has the go-ahead to make decisions. We authorize things all the time in our daily life. One example is when we grant software to have authority and access. Capricorn also rules the teeth and joints. We need these things to live well. They are integral structures that help us thrive. Not that we can't function without teeth or joints. Plenty of people do. It's that we tend to have an easier time in life when these things are present. Life is not always easy, though, and lots of people have some personal infrastructure damage, whether it's a chipped tooth, a strained knee, or some other serious matters. Somehow, we keep on keeping on. And Capricorn governs that as well, the keeping on part. The first full moon that takes place on the evening of the 21st of June illuminates the beginning of a new process that creates a new foundation. It's not an end. It's a lighting up of the future pathway, though. What you do from the 21st of June through the 21st of July matters. It's very important to be observant, self-reflective, and accountable to yourself. It's not the time to try to wrest control of the situation, take over in the name of expediency to make someone else's life easier, or to feather other people's nests. Codependency won't live long in this energy. In fact, it will reap some pretty harsh rewards. Some people like to claim Capricorn and karma are besties. And let's just say for a moment that we use that as a metaphor. If Capricorn governs natural consequences, aka karma, then the month in between full moons is going to be chock-o-block full of FAFO. And consequences come in all forms. We can act in ways that we feel are fully justified, and on one hand, they may well be. But they're not without consequences. After all, every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So when we choose to do anything, there is a consequence, even when we're in the right. Consequences aren't always negative, but they are always logical. In between these two Capricorn full moons, there will be a ream of natural and logical consequences. It's a reap what you sow moment in time. Some of that will be worth getting out the popcorn and soda for. And other things will leave us feeling like we got sucker punched if we were not conscious of how our thoughts, words, deeds, and actions line up or didn't line up over the past 6 months. On the positive side, if you've actually put in the real work, you'll very much reap the rewards and you'll see the beautiful beginning of a new stage in life. Remember, not all consequences are negative. And they're always logical. So if you put in the time, energy, and due diligence, if you've been honest and forthright, been humble and studious, then you'll see some fruits of your labor come up for harvest. But we got to be honest with ourselves, okay? And so often people think honesty is negativity. Be like, well, if I'm honest with myself, I didn't really try that hard. Or, to the contrary, I've been busting my butt, blah, blah, blah. But where are you putting your energy? What is your actual structure? Okay. Have you been plugging away at something that isn't aligned with you, trying to make someone else proud or prove a point? Are you working with your natural energy flow? Have you assessed your capabilities? Okay. That's something we do in the mystery school. Okay. That's something we do in the mystery school. We have exercises that help you assess your capabilities. What are your strengths? What are you good at? Remember, you don't have to be good at everything. You have to be good at a couple of things. And you got to know what you're good at. It's not egotistical to know your strength and your value. Okay? It's just not. It is very hard to undercut you, defame you, poke holes at you, provoke you when you are secure in the knowledge of self, and part of that is your capabilities. And so also, if you're always self-diminishing and self-depreciating, oh, well, it's just something I do, and you don't take a compliment, which, boy, man, I had to learn that. I had a friend who looked at me once and said, would you just say thank you? I'm like, yeah, okay. Because I get really flustered. People are like, oh my God, that's really great what you did, blah, blah, blah. And I'd be like, well, actually, and I'd start diminishing myself. And this was an older friend of mine. Thank God for older friends. And she was like, stop doing that to yourself and just say thank you, for God's sake. It's not egotistical. I know a lot of times when you have a spiritual awakening and you enter the spiritual community and you hear a lot about the death of the ego, people don't really understand what the ego is. But the ego is this construct, this conscious construct, an idealized view of self that may or may not be accurate. And we don't really want it to die. We want to integrate it with our soul self. And that's a whole other thing. We don't need to worry about that right now. But it's enough to know that if you know your capabilities, you know your strengths, you know what you're good at, then you're able to do well. You're able to take forward action. Not everything is going to go the way you want it to go. Not everything is going to go right the first time. That doesn't mean it's a failure. Sometimes you have to plug away at things. So with this full moon, what you want to do is you want to set yourself up for success. And that means give yourself some grace. Okay? Don't beat yourself up. Don't put yourself down. Catch yourself when you're doing negative self-talk and reframe it. Reframing is a beautiful tool. You're like, well, I don't know how to do it. And then add yet. I don't know how to do it yet. But I know I will learn how. And then leave it there. Give your brain some wiggle room to work with. You're so precious. You really are. Imagine if everybody in the world understood their capabilities, understood their value, understood that they had influence over their own life. We don't have influence over everything. We can't change the weather. The big picture stuff we don't have influence over. But how we meet circumstances, we very much have influence over. Again, I remember as a child going through some very traumatic situations. Just off the charts, ugly stuff. And I dissociated a lot. Thank God for dissociation. It saved my life. I could be in another world so fast. And I would imagine beautiful places, beautiful things. I had a whole world full of live-action porcelain dolls in my head who loved a good tea party and a good book. I was not much more than 5. Sometimes it's okay to imagine better with no evidence around us. That imagination, that ability to imagine something else fantastical, gave me a framework, a scaffolding, so to speak, that even though I no longer dissociate unless I choose to today, I can sit in a situation that is not my preference or look at the state of the world that is out of my control and say, well, what can I do? What can I create? How can I use my imagination to do something that feels more satisfying? That's how we got the Awake Space. That's how we get the magazine. Because when I look at the world and I feel like, I really wish it wasn't going that direction, I think, well, what if I wrote an article or did a podcast and it made one person's day better? What if that happened? What if one person felt better about themselves today? Wouldn't that make a little bit of a difference? Wouldn't that be a pebble in a pond making a ripple? Couldn't that change the trajectory we're on? Oh, I'd like to believe it will. There might be some realist out there who would tell me I'm running a fool's errand. And if I put my influence in their hands, I might stop doing what I do. Thank heavens for that little 5-year-old me who learned how to hold a vision. That's how we see our capabilities. What somebody might have said, oh, you're a daydreamer, or you're a dreamer. So what? We need more of you. We still have Neptune in Pisces. And she's at the 29th degree for right now, because she's going to go retrograde soon. Use that imagination to help build a better structure for yourself, using your capabilities with this full moon at 1 degree of Capricorn. We're laying the foundations. In fact, before you can even lay a foundation, you have to make the form. You know, my dad had a business on the side. He was a firefighter. And when I was a little girl, he did concrete finishing, cement work. And he did all manner of fancy things, not just, sidewalks. He did some real decorative work and even built mausoleums, in the Portland area and in Oregon City. And I used to go help him on the job sites as a little girl. And they have to put the 2x4 frames in first. You have to calculate how wide it is and how long it is. And you have to have the frame set before you pour the concrete. The wood frames hold in the liquid concrete before it dries to become the foundation. And that's the metaphor I want to use for this first full moon in Capricorn, the one on June 21st. You're laying the framework. Well, you can't use rotten wood for a frame. So I want you to find the very best of what you're good at. And it doesn't have to be an essay. Just make yourself a little outline. I'm good at these things. Okay. It could be, I'm really good at making apple pie, or, some people are good in a crisis. Well, why are you good in a crisis? Well, I can get very, very calm. I'm very good at getting ready for things. Okay. I'm good at finding a deal. I'm good at making trades. I'm good at making things. I'm good at connecting people. Those are all things you can be good at. Okay. And again, I can learn. And then if you think, oh, but I'm not very fast. Well, I don't have to learn fast. I can learn step by step. Everybody learns differently. Okay. There's nothing wrong with learning differently. Standardized education has created a lot of trauma, in my opinion. Everybody learns the way they learn. Some people need to learn hands-on and through experience. Other people need to visually work things out. Other people need to sit and think about things and take a while to digest it and process it. Not one of those ways is wrong. But there are ways that are less convenient for a system that wants to warehouse people on an assembly line. If there's a skill that's in need in the next 18 months, it's critical thinking. If this isn't working, even though I made the best plan, what can I do besides this? If this isn't going, you've got to be adaptable. You can't just sit, life was going to be this way, and this is how it was going to go, and I've been lied to, and they told me to go to college, and now I'm saddled with blah, blah, blah. You and everybody else, honey. And for a long time. It's been that way since the 90s. This is not a new situation. What are you going to do? There's always something that can be done. It may not be the original plan, and that's okay, but how can you tweak it? And was that original plan really authentic to you anyway, or were you trying to make somebody else happy? Were you trying to prove yourself to somebody? Were you really in your power, or were you trying to gain power by the approval of other? Ouch! Oh, that one hurts. I remember, man, I learned that in my early 20s because I did all those things that made you successful. And my parents were very proud, and other people were very proud. And I was like, this is it? This is all there is? None of this was all that exciting to me. It wasn't very fulfilling because it wasn't authentic. Because like everybody else, I had never been allowed to truly understand what was authentically mine to want, what was authentically fulfilling to me. That whole needs improvement thing in school, instead of focusing on your strengths and knowing your capabilities and understanding that success is an ever-changing goalpost. And that desires can be fulfilled, then you need to find new ones. Oh, yeah. All stuff I want you to think about with this full moon. And again, in part 2 of this podcast, I am recording the ceremonies for each of the rising signs and talking to each of the rising signs on how to really do their ritual. And, not so much performatively, but just giving you ideas, and with room to tweak so it's authentic to you. Alrighty. I think we need some patron shout outs again. We're going to do part 2 of our patron shout outs. And then we'll talk a little bit about what's to come and the setup for 2025, which is July, August, September, October. Of course, obviously November, December. But things are about to get hot next month. And we've got some really big stuff on the way. And I want to talk about the Republican National Convention, the Democrat National Convention, some of the stuff I see coming up in July and August. Just a thumbnail sketch as it's a setup for October and some of my thoughts on that. And then and what that means for 2025. And remember, if you haven't already, there's still some space, not a lot, there's still some space available for the 2025 year ahead. But we'll talk about that more in the last segment. Right now, we gotta do some shout outs for patrons. Right, here's the patron shout outs, part 2, or part 2. All right, let's give those shout outs to Meredith, Melinda, Tracy, Mrs. Coach, Laura, Yari, Starlight, Katie, Claudia, Elena, Jen, Lori, Moira, Brianna, Marla, Lena, Beth, Kara, Amy, Jamie, Meredith, Laura, Krista, Steph, Lee, Emma, Albano, Jess, Stephanie, Cynthia, Sarah, Lois, Veronica, Sarah, Julie, Joanna, Kelly, Kim, Susie, or Susie, Patrice, Holly, Debbie, Joseph, Sharon, Eric, Robin, Jackie, Ashley, Jessica, Julie, Kelly, Mary, Nancy, Christy, Lori, Mikey, Sarah, Katie, Danielle, Layla, Jeremy, Gail, Patricia, Dee Dee Capone, Kevin, Katrina, Lenora, a furry woodland creature, Shane, psychic medium Deanna, Haley Morris, Kristen, Julie, Jonathan, Sarah, Leslie, Kate, Judith Resists, Robin, Heather, Sherry, Chris, Lindsay, Lisa, Melody, Desiree, Evan, Julie, Sharon, Lisa, Amanda, Bree, Greta, Jennifer, and Caitlin. Whoa! My golly, my golly, my golly. So many new members. I want to thank you all for keeping this podcast ad-free and helping us grow more, including making a really great astrology magazine. I'm not taking submissions just yet. I'm working on it being invitation right now. So I'm just inviting people, former students, etc., to write articles. Still planning out the next 6 issues because, like I said, I chew off more than I can bite, or I bite off more than I can chew. And the 2025 year ahead has got my attention right now. As soon as I have that done, I'll start getting more information out. July's issue is going to be very full of information. There's a lot going on. I know I'll have an article about the Republican National Convention in there. There's all sorts of reasons to support that magazine. So to those of you at the magazine tier, thank you for helping that happen. Alrighty, let's talk about that energy coming up in July and August and into October, and what we need to think about, because again, we're in the middle of those 2 full moons. This is very volatile energy. I do think there's conflict on the horizon, and I'll talk about that in a minute, and how you can prep, and I'll talk a little bit about how this is leading into 2025. All right, so Saturn goes retrograde on June 30th, and that's not that big of a deal, okay? I know there's a lot of people like, oh no, Saturn retrograde. Look, Saturn, or actually Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto go retrograde every year. It's not that rare to see. They go retrograde for, between about 4 months and 5.5 months, respective of their orbits. But we already have Pluto retrograde. With Saturn stationing retrograde, that gives us a little more time to prepare as well. Okay. It does take some of the brakes off, though. I mean, Saturn in Pisces already doesn't have great boundaries, right? It's still structure, but it's a different kind of structure. And we're going to see a lot of erosion events. My eye is on you, Florida. You're on limestone. Limestone is porous. That's why you get sinkholes, guys. Not a judgment, just a fact. Okay. It's going to be very, very wet continuing on. And then we'll have Neptune stationing retrograde in July, early July. And we got a couple other things going on. I've been looking at the Republican National Convention, and I've been looking at the Democratic National Convention in August. And both of the start charts, the opening of the event charts, have interesting energy. And guess when the Republicans is? It's July 15th. Well, what was in my 2024 year ahead, patrons? All patrons at the $5 level and up, get that video from last year. I release it halfway through the year, okay, to patrons. I said July 14th, 15th of 2024 is extremely volatile. I think there's going to be a huge upset. Now, this could be they don't pick Trump. This could be something happens to Trump. This could be another nominee is chosen. This could be violence at the event. It could be a bunch of stuff. And why is that? Well, Mars is going to be conjunct Uranus. I know, it sounds obscene, and it might be. But Mars in Taurus is going to be like right up and close to impersonal with Uranus in Taurus. And that's surprise violence, at the lowest level. Now you might also take inspired action, but when we're looking at the mundane, there's no agency. We're not looking at, it's rare to see the high vibe. It's rare to see the high vibe. On a personal level, you might take inspired action and it could be great. So don't expect the worst on a personal level. But I'm talking about what you're going to see in the headlines, what's going to be out there in the unconscious. Oh, so that will be interesting to watch. It could even be an assassination attempt. It could be a whole bunch of stuff at that place. And then in August with the DNC's convention, guess what? We've got Jupiter and Mars conjunct, which can also be big violence. So there's probably going to be, protests and all kinds of stuff. And I think there's a surprise at that event. Like I said, I know Trump will not be president again. Biden has better transits, but they're still not great. Don't talk about RFK. I don't want to hear it. He doesn't have transits. Marianne Williamson doesn't have the transits. There's a bit of a surprise going to happen at both conventions. And I've said I haven't been convinced that either Trump or Biden are going to be the ultimate candidate for various reasons. It's just like, I'm not 100% sure. I don't feel secure when I look at the November 5th chart for the election. Like, I see that the power that holds the executive, but I don't see a clear candidate. And it could be that elections we don't have the answers that day. It could, things are litigious, but it could also mean, the energy of that day is weird when I look at the chart. We could see a suspension of voting. I'm not saying I can just hear the conspiracy theorists now. Oh, Biden is going to cancel elections. No. I think it would be like devastating storms, like if you can't get to the polls, if there are no polls to get to. Because October is insanely volatile, especially that last week of October. We have Mars in opposition to Pluto in Capricorn. And Cancer Mars is not a sign I would trifle with. Okay? It's not weak. It can fight dirty. And I think we're going to see some dirty weather. I think we're going to see a hell of a storm. I've been doing a lot of year ahead readings for people, and I'm seeing a lot of weather in those charts. That's one thing that really helps when I'm making predictions, is doing those year aheads, which, by the way, those are open only until the 20th of July. I close them on the solstice. So if you want to get your year ahead reading booked before December, as far as that, because that'll be the next time I open these suckers up. Maybe I'll open them up end of November, but we'll see. If you want to get yours booked, I know I'm booked up into August, but guys, oh my God. I know I'm booked up into August, but book yourself. Get yourself in. I'm not going to add more time. I'm going to be offering some classes, but if you want to get, especially for those of you who get that 50% off discount, take advantage of it. Okay. It's crazy, this energy coming up. And that's why I really want you to build that foundation. Go back and listen to that part. Don't get freaked out. But weather is the biggest thing I see. I do see some real potential for violence to erupt in Europe. I do see real potential for maybe some issues on the Polish border. I talked about that in that event I did with Matilda. For those of you who went, you can review your recording. If you want a copy of that, that's in the Patreon shop. Speaking of, Matilda and I are going to do an event on August 3rd that prepares you through August through December, pretty much, and we're only doing one date. So we'll be getting that out there. Who is Matilda? Matilda is a psychic medium, and we have cross training. I'm a political analyst by training. She's a behavioral economist, and she's psychic and a medium and channels spirit. And I do the astrology with some solid analysis and intuition. And when we work together, it is like a perfect tag team match. It is insanely fun and very good. And it's entertaining. We have a podcast that we call the Sassy Seers, where it's just two middle-aged women after work talking shop and having fun, because we know people need some lighthearted things. We deal with enough seriousness on our own podcasts. So her podcast is Beyond the Broomstick, by the way. And she gives great spiritual advice there. But I'm going to tell you that this is the time to really get prepared. So here's what you can do to get ready for the times ahead. And I'll talk about 2025 in just a minute. You really want to put your dried goods away. Okay, so you want to have those in waterproof containers. You want to have go bags. I don't care where you live in the world. Have a go bag. That's a bag you can put you can have a backpack. Has important documents, things you need, deeds, passports, birth certificates, any kind of documents that you need, anything important. Any kind of valuables. You don't want to have to go looking for those things, because in the case of an emergency, you want to just be able to get out. And what do I mean by emergencies? Well, we may see an uptick in seismic activity, volcanic activity, weather, and we could see some border conflicts expand. Philippines and China are really going to start getting into it. I think things are going to get hot in the Straits of Taiwan as well. Situation in Israel, Palestine is not going to get better. Okay. And in fact, into next year, there's going to be an expansion, or an attempt to expand it. I think the Polish border is shaky. Obviously, we have, Russia with it flexing its navy in Cuba. So the saber rattling has started. I do not see global thermonuclear war, but I do see the potential for tactical strikes. I do see potential for sabotage, and I think we have been seeing sabotage. Everybody's asked, what about World War III? Well, actually, I think we've been in it for a little while. When I say I don't see global thermonuclear war, what I'm saying is I'm not seeing what most people are thinking of. I'm not seeing a Mad Max scenario globally. It already is in some places in the world. Look at Sudan. Look at the Democratic Republic of Congo. It is not good in those places. Okay. But I think my eye is kind of on the eastern seaboard and the northeast in October. I just keep seeing walls of water. And I think there might be multiple storm fronts involved. But I think there might also be like a potential meteor, not a big one, but enough of one to cause a big wave maybe. It could be ice melt in Antarctica. And that could be caused, or just even a big sheet of ice breaking up because of an earthquake on top of ice melt. There's multiple things going on. In October, there's some perfect storm energy with that. And mid-September, I'm looking at Southern California, and I do see the potential for seismic activity. And I think of a decent size, over 6.0, between 6 and 7. And I think it's on the California-Nevada border, or in the San Bernardino Mountains. I don't think it's in LA proper. But that can mess things up, on top of what I see happening in 2025. And man, normally when I do my 2025 or when I do my year ahead readings, I usually have the astrology on one slide and then just short, brief notes that I expand on as I talk about it. I got 2 slides per month just with explanatory text, guys. I'm just saying. We start January because in December, Mars stations retrograde. It's in Leo. It retrogrades all the way back to 17 degrees of Cancer in February. And then it goes direct in February. And it takes for freaking ever to move its way back up to Leo, where all hell's going to break loose. April and May of next year are just stunning. But March is freaking deluge. Oops, I just knocked the mic. March is just like biblical level wet. And that's, I called for like 2 years ago, I think, I called for a mega flood in California in 2025 because I was looking at that weather. And, we're going to have, I don't think I'm wrong on that. I think, Lake Tulare, it ain't going away anytime soon. So it's pretty consequential and substantial. So you want to look up when the last mega floods were in the 30s and then I think the 1800s, if I remember correctly, and make preparations because, and I'm going to say this for anybody anywhere, by the time they say to evacuate, it's starting to get a little late. Okay. So you want to use your intuition. You want to trust your instincts. If you get a, man, I need to get out of here feeling, don't second guess it. Don't let people second guess it. Okay. Likewise, if let's say you're on high ground, but power could be out, it might be hard to get to a store. So having potable water on hand, and this could be around, I see floods all over the place in March, not just California. Okay. Midwest, East Coast, Southeast, Mexico, into Central America. I mean, it's kind of ubiquitously, like the whole world is wet. Okay. It's almost like Kevin Costner's Waterworld. Okay. And it's really going to drive home the point that we collectively as a species need to deal with this. So you want to have potable water. You want to have some cash on hand just because in case POS systems aren't working. You want to have water filtration, sump pumps if you need them or you think they're going to work. Alternative power sources. I've got a crank radio that also has like a USB charger. There's small solar panel things that you can get that can, power smaller devices. It may be cold. And so having warming blankets, you want to always have some twine or rope around, like if you need to hang up things to dry. Wool can help you keep you warm when it's wet. And if you can't wear wool, you can put cotton underneath it. That will wick moisture away from your skin. Hotsies and footsies, those are hand warmers and foot warmers. Those are good to have on hand. Secondary heat source, if you can. We'll go back to linking up how-tos on that stuff. You do not want to use a camping stove inside. You do not want carbon monoxide poisoning. So no barbecues inside, nothing with propane or butane or any of that inside. You want to be careful about fire hazards inside. Okay. Get a hold of your emergency management system, either in your county. If you're in the United States, every county has an emergency management board, and they have all the evacuation plans and information, and you can get a hold of them for information. I'm not sure how it works in other countries, but yeah, it's going to be wild, and we're going to see probably more civil unrest as a result of that, So you want to have an ability to check on your friends and neighbors and keep yourself safe. Not everybody acts in a calm and rational manner, and so you want to be as secure as possible. I know you guys are like, Laurie, when does it get better? I'm like, don't shoot me, man. I'm the messenger. It gets better when we make it better, guys. We're not going to be able to reverse climate change at this point, but we can mitigate and we can adapt, and that's what human beings are good at. And I have a lot of hope in that. Things do even out. Okay, they do even out because but just not in the interim. Because change is we're going through rapid systemic change. Like things are changing, so that's why I keep telling you the old playbook won't work. That thing that you thought you would do your whole life, like that's not going to work. You have to be adaptable. Okay. And you've got to be willing to do some things that maybe are your favorite thing. You know, I'm not saying don't be out of alignment. You don't have to hate it. But maybe you think it's beneath you. You know, maybe you think, oh, well, I don't want to do that. I went to college, or I don't want to do that. You know, you may have to work with your hands for a minute. Like if the internet goes down for a sustained period of time, my business is impacted. What would I do? Well, I'm a damn good cook. Now, I wouldn't open up a restaurant, but I definitely would cook in exchange for blah, blah, blah. I'm not a short order cook, though. People would have to eat the damn dinner I made them. They'd have to tell me their food preferences ahead of time, but I am not a short order cook. So, you know, they're going to eat it and they're going to like it. That's the type of cook I am. Can't clean houses because I can't see. By the time that I can see the dust bunnies, you're in a lot of trouble. And I'm not saying we're going to have a Mad Max world. We're not. We're going to have areas deeply impacted. And it takes time to rebuild infrastructure. And I just don't see that any party in the United States has the fortitude or the dedication to the people to actually make sure any infrastructure works. We still have, you know, Flint is still struggling. Mississippi, just the whole state. Okay. Point in case, there's still damage from Katrina. And we're going to see some storms that rival Katrina this summer. So I know we have listeners all over. And I don't want you to be afraid. I want you to be prepared as possible. And faith gets us through a lot more than we can imagine. It really does. Knowing that things turn out okay. I'll never forget. I was in the middle of a very sticky situation. No money. Nowhere to live yet. I hadn't figured that part out. This wasn't that long ago, guys. This is like 2017. I blew my life up. And my mom was like freaking out on me. And I was like, you know what? If I have to stay in my car, I have to stay in my car. It's fine. And she was like, are you kidding? I'm like, no, I'm not. Like, I would rather be in my car than be in the status quo one more minute. And she says, well, what are you going to do? Like, you're not in a great situation. I'm like, don't worry about it. It'll be okay. And she was, well, how do you know that? I'm like, I just do. Well, what do you mean by okay? I'm like, I don't know, but I know I will be. And that's faith. I had no evidence I was going to be okay. In fact, all of the evidence was pointing to the contrary. And made a few phone calls, got things arranged. I was like, look, I'm okay. Well, what are you going to do after that? I'm like, I don't know, but I'll be okay. Guess what? I was. Because what if it works out? What if it works? What if it does work? Instead of what if this bad thing always happens? And what if this bad things always happen? So when I think about like, well, what if there's an earthquake? I'm like, okay, what if there's an earthquake? I will make scenarios in my head because I live in Southern California. I will make scenarios in my head. Okay, if there's structural damage and I can get out of the building, what are my first steps? Okay. If I can't get out of the building, I gotta wait for help, right? Okay. All right. Well, what can I do to ensure that if things get weird, I'm protected where I'm sleeping? Okay, I can do that. All right. But if there's no major damage that's visible, then what's my next step? What do I have to my advantage? What foodstuffs do I have? What does my pantry look like? Do I have all of my documents easily accessible? If there's no major structural damage, but we're out of power, what can I do? Okay. Do I have enough chargers? Do I have enough water? Do I need to make sure I have water that I can store? Okay, what time of year is it? And so I have all these little scenarios. What do I do if? Not what will I do, but what will I do in case there's an emergency? Okay. If you feel at any point in time that you need to be somewhere else, pay attention to that. That's your instinct. We are mammals. We have instincts. Use them. Pay attention to them. So what if somebody makes fun of you? Trust me, I got made fun of for a very long time warning people about 2020. Eventually, I got a whole lot of texts going, you weren't crazy after all. Oh, you think? Thank you. I know I'm not crazy. My mom had me tested. Thanks. Well, I had me tested, but 0 clinical markers, bitches. That means you're not crazy. Just saying. Just saying. Maybe eccentric. I'll live with that. No, it didn't test for neurodivergence, but that's not crazy. That's a whole other thing. Let's see what else. So 2025 is wild. And you can catch me live on June 22nd at 5 p.m. Pacific, or 5:30 p.m. Pacific. I don't know. It's on the registration form. You can sign up for that before the 22nd. There's still room. There's not a ton of room, but there's still room. If you're a patron, you get that 50% off discount through the 20th. It ends on the 20th. The discount ends. So sign up. Get your discount. It gets you the recording. And you get access to the one in December where I do my refresh because I got a lot more context about what that start of the year looks like. So, just saying. Listen to the first part of this podcast again about building your resiliency. So part 2 of the patron of this podcast, I'm going to go through the full moon, talk about that for everybody and what that means for you, talk a little bit about those rituals from the magazine, and then go through the headlines for the week and what I think you're going to see up on deck this week of the solstice and the full moon. And what you can expect to see. We saw a lot of my predictions come true over the last couple of days, from the flooding to the E. coli, the salmonella. Unfortunately, in Baltimore, there was a chemical agent used at a pride parade. Talked a little bit about attacks in public spaces. Whether you're in the LGBTQIA community or other communities, like just in general, just a human being walking into a public space, you do need to be careful this summer. Just because there's going to be people who don't wield their consciousness with deliberation kind of losing it. So be prepared for some unsettling news to continue in public spaces. It's unfortunate, but not everybody does deliberately wield their consciousness. But anyway, I'll be talking about all of that and more on part 2 of this episode in my Patreon. You can check that out in my show notes. You can click through that link and join as a free member for notifications of when the podcast comes out, or you can join any of the tiers to get access to the patron-only podcast. I'm Laurie Rivers. I want to thank you for listening, and I look forward to seeing you at the solstice party.